the Labour Party Autism and Neurodiversity Manifesto. What is neurodiversity? Okay, so humanity is neurologically diverse. Different people have different brain wiring. Neurological differences include autism, attention deficit disorders, dyslexia, dyspraxia, and others. So why have a manifesto on this subject? Because of discrimination, because of distress, and because of disadvantage, all of which neurodivergent people face. In various areas, so diagnosis or identification, hugely long waiting lists for diagnosis of neurodivergent conditions. Often people are misdiagnosed on the way to getting their correct diagnosis. And while your needs are still not being met, a lot of people can develop mental ill health. Independent living. So benefit cuts have impacted severely on neurodivergent people. NHS cuts have left people not getting adequate care, not getting the care they need. And lack of social care has become a particular problem, with, again, people not getting the care that they need, and some people being put in facilities a long, long way from home and a long, long way from the personal support networks. In the education system, special education needs and school cuts, unsuitable assessments and school exclusions are really big issues for neurodivergent people. A dyslexic school student is never going to be able to show their full talents and abilities if they're assessed just on written exams. And exclusions often happen. For example, autistic kids are often excluded after months and months of being bullied or have their needs not met, or being in a really difficult sensory environment. They might then have a meltdown, smash up the science lab, and find themselves being excluded without the trigger issues being considered. In the area of work, only 16% of autistic adults are in full-time employment. There's discrimination in recruitment, and there are barriers in the workplace. Just as an example of discrimination in recruitment, it can start even at the level of the job advert. So if a job advert says, for example, friendly, outgoing team player required for job as computer programmer. Okay, why do you need to be a friendly, outgoing team player to be a computer programmer? You probably don't, but by wording it like that, the advert has filtered out probably quite a few autistic people, maybe some other people as well, who know that they're not friendly, outgoing team players, but may well be very good computer programmers. Prejudice and discrimination. Often neurodivergent people are demonized as some kind of weirdos. We experience sensory overload from all the noise and light around us, and often are subjected to quack cures. And some of the things that people will sell you to cure your child of being autistic are absolutely shocking. And the justice system. There's a shocking level of hate crime against neurodivergent people. Policing can be very harsh and judgmental towards people showing neurodivergent traits. And the prison system, not only are neurodivergent people overrepresented in the prison system, but it's not a great environment for them either. And here are some quite shocking examples of how the justice system has treated some autistic people. So this guy is called Michael Gilchrist. He's autistic, he lives in Manchester, and he was tasered 7 times by Greater Manchester Police, and he hasn't spoken a word since. This guy is Farouk Ali. He is autistic. He lives in Bedfordshire, and when he went out to help his neighbours put their bins out, a couple of police officers decided it would be a great idea to chase him down the road in their car and taunt him and bully him, and they ended up getting sacked and prosecuted for that. And this guy is Autism Brown. Autism is 21 years old. When he was 18, he was convicted under a joint enterprise conviction for not stealing a mobile phone, just for being there when some other people stole a mobile phone. And because he was born in Jamaica and moved to Britain at the age of 4, he's scheduled to be deported to Jamaica. He is autistic, dyslexic, learning disabled, and experiencing mental ill health. So those are examples of injustices against autistic people. You will, of course, notice something else that all those people have in common. They are all Black men, and there is a real intersection of race and neurodivergence in terms of injustice in the justice system. Okay, so what are the policies in this manifesto then? On diagnosis and identification, we want it to be available to all without delays. We want it to recognise neurodivergence in girls and women as well as in boys and men. We want assessment of related conditions. And we want adequate support after diagnosis. It's all very well getting a confirmation that you're autistic or dyspraxic or what have you, but if they then say, but we don't have any service for you, that's leaving you to sink or swim, isn't it? In independent living, we want to stop and reverse cuts. We want local council autism forums to include autistic representatives. Now that sounds a little bit odd, but under the Autism Act and the associated guidance, most councils now have an autism partnership board or some form of forum or committee. And although they might have one or two autistic people in, they're often just like handpicked rather than being elected representatives of autistic people, and are very much outnumbered by professionals and officers. Okay, we want adequate benefits. In health and social care, we want the NHS restored from the wave of cuts and privatisation it's had over recent years, and we want privatisation reversed. We want care provision close to home, to family and to support networks. We want neurodiversity training for all public service staff. And we want provision for autism service dogs. So we want them to have the same recognition and rights as guide dogs for the blind and other disability support dogs. In the education system, we want well-funded, publicly run, accountable schools. We want teachers and teaching assistants core training to include neurodiversity. We want provision for neurodivergent students at all schools, colleges and universities. We want consideration of neurodiversity in early years and in Sure Start. Varied teaching and assessment methods. People learn in different ways. Their neurotype can be a factor in that, and therefore they suit assessment in different ways as well. We want education about neurodiversity in the curriculum so everyone understands it better. And we want to take the stress out of studying. It is shameful the amount of anxiety that our school system causes, particularly towards teenagers, but even to younger kids as well. In the world of work, we would like there to be a legal requirement to make workplaces and working conditions more equal, accessible, and less hostile. We want job applications to be accessible and non-discriminatory. We want workplace accessibility assessments. In particular, actually, we'd like those to replace work capability assessments. So instead of assessing an individual person as to their fitness to work, we start assessing workplaces as to whether they are fit for people to work in. We want anti-discrimination law to cover volunteers as well as employees. It might surprise you that it doesn't at the moment, but I'm aware of, for example, a heritage railway that has a blanket ban on autistic volunteers. And that's not unlawful because the Equality Act doesn't cover volunteers, only covers workers. We want support for self-employed and neurodivergent people. If you are self-employed and you are, for example, dyscalculic, then filling in your tax return is not going to be the easiest part of your year. Okay, on the area of prejudice and discrimination, we would like the application of universal design. So universal design is a concept about the built environment being accessible to everyone, not just step-free for wheelchair users, although obviously that, but also easy to navigate for people with visual impairments, not distressing in a sensory way, that kind of thing. Okay, accessible to everyone. We want the government to apply a strategy to tackle bullying and hate crime against neurodivergent people, and to recognise in law that hate crime can be aimed at neurodivergent people. And we want to regulate treatments that are offered to neurodivergent people, and we want to ban quack cures. And there's a lot more information about that in an appendix to this manifesto. And on justice and the law, we want to make the justice system accessible to people of all neurologies. We want the police and the justice system to stop criminalising non-harmful, unusual behaviours. So it is often the case that people get lifted by the police because they are skipping, spinning, flapping, shouting, etc. in public. Behaviours that aren't harmful but are socially considered to be weird, but that may actually just arise from someone's neurological status. We want support and rehabilitation for offenders with ADHD and other neurodivergent conditions. The reason for specifically mentioning ADHD there is that a very high proportion of prisoners meet the diagnostic criteria for ADHD. And we want to make neurological status a protected characteristic under the Equality Act with the same protections as disability. We want to strengthen the public sector equality duty and to extend it to the private sector. So that's a piece of law that says that public sector bodies have a legal duty to promote and improve equality. But it was quite weak. It was quite weak when it came in, and in the last year of the last Labour government, and then the Tory Liberal coalition immediately made it weaker as soon as they took office. We want it strengthening and we want it extending to the private sector. Okay, and we want to improve people's understanding of neurodivergence, education about neurodiversity at all levels, a public campaign to raise awareness of neurodiversity, more resources for research guided by the needs and concerns of neurodivergent people. And it's important to put it that way because at the moment, research is guided by private companies trying to find marketable products. So they will fund research which enables them to produce some kind of wonder drug that will cure this or suppress that or what have you. We want it guided by what neurodivergent people say that we want society to understand better. So in the 2019 election, John McDonnell pledged that the Labour Party, had it been elected, which sadly it wasn't, would have implemented these policies in full. And I hope by thinking over these policies, you'd see that if that had happened, that would have had a radical transformative improvement to the lives of neurodivergent people, our friends and families. This is the group of people who drafted the manifesto, have now formed an organisation called Neurodivergent Labour, which is open to all Labour Party members and supporters who are themselves neurodivergent. People who are not neurodivergent can sign up as registered supporters as well. What this organisation does is it campaigns for this manifesto, and it campaigns to make the Labour movement itself more neurodiversity friendly, and it aims to give a voice to neurodivergent people within our movement.